Joining us now from New Orleans with reaction, the former commissioner of the IRS under President George W. Bush, Mark Everson. Great to see you, sir. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Monica.
So, you're former IRS commissioner. You heard the FBI director's testimony this week where he claims to have no knowledge about who the lead investigator is on the IRS case, how many investigators have been assigned to this case. This IRS abuse of power could very well be the most dangerous scandal in U.S. history because this arm of the government was targeting broad swaths of society, and yet the head of the FBI doesn't know. That doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence, does it?
Let me say a couple things here. First, this is a serious matter. I always felt that when I was at the service that everybody did their level best to call things right down the middle. So this targeting is very unfortunate, and it's totally wrong. Now, I am actually, you may find this hard to believe, rather more reassured by Director Mueller's testimony than the opposite, because when something's handed over to the Bureau, you want it to go into its normal channels. You wouldn't want this to be a political brouhaha. He's got a lot to worry about, terrorism investigations, other things. So I think this has gone into the normal process, and that's right. But that's a long process. It pertains only to the criminal justice implications. What is of more concern is really what the Congress is doing, because if you want answers and you want to get after things thoroughly and quickly and in a more transparent way, if you will, rather than just, yes, we're going to indict or no, we're not going to indict, the right place to get that aired out is in the Congress, and that's something else.
We may concede, Mark, that perhaps the FBI director isn't fully apprised of all of the details of the IRS investigation. And if we concede that, let me just challenge you on the point, because it's happening now in the context where the President of the United States claims that he knows nothing. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton claims she knows nothing about Benghazi. You have the Attorney General, Eric Holder, claiming he knows nothing, basically about anything. And so when the FBI director goes in front of the American people and he claims he doesn't know about the IRS investigation, it doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence, not just in the FBI, but in the federal government and in people in positions of authority who are supposed to know things. We hire them to know stuff, and nobody seems to know what the heck is going on.
Let me just stick to the service, and if I can, I agree with you 100%. And what we've had, Monica, is we had failures at three levels. One, down in that Cincinnati office where some people, for lack of a better term, they lost their minds, and then totally inadequate supervision at the exempt organizations level, where it took 2 years to sort this out, and as is now becoming clear, some of these overly intrusive questions were actually approved or perhaps suggested in Washington. And finally, at the top level, and I think this really gets to your overall observation, the fact that the commissioner said, look, he gave the old Sergeant Schultz defense, I know nothing. That just doesn't work here. And when he did understand all the facts, he didn't go back and correct his congressional testimony. That's what I can tell you from my conversations with people around the country. That was what was most disturbing about the whole thing, that the leadership sort of tried to wash its hands of this.
Yeah, it seems to me, looking at the IRS abuse of power, that this is either deep corruption or it's profound incompetence. You seem to be siding on the side of profound incompetence. Is that right?
What we've seen so far is I think you had a convergence of really very bad mismanagement. You can't take your hand off the rudder. I can tell you, it's a pretty unwieldy, large organization of great complexity. You have to be looking at all of it. The commissioner indicated, he said, look, I wasn't particularly interested in this piece of the agency. I stayed away from it because it is sensitive. Well, you know, it's kind of like the Secretary of State saying, geez, the Jewish people get very concerned about Israel, so I'm not going to wade into the Mideast. You can't do that. You have to do the whole agency, and that included these C4s, which were generating quite a bit of controversy. So it's just unfortunate the way the whole thing was handled.
Final question for you, Mr. Everson. You worked for President George W. Bush when you were heading up the IRS. Would you agree that the President of the United States, when he takes charge of the executive branch, sets the tone and sets the ideology for everybody serving under him?
Well, I think that I would just tell you that in my experience, from top to bottom, the White House down through Treasury and to certainly my own role, I always felt I had the independence that I needed and the backing that I needed to do what I thought was right. And what that meant is sometimes it would go the way the White House maybe politically would want something to go. Other times it would go just the opposite way. But I felt, Monica, that if I did my job straight down the middle, that would be the best for the country and ultimately for the man who was leading the country at the time.
Yes, and that's why you did your job so well, and we'll have to see what comes out of this investigation on this IRS. Mr. Everson, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Monica.
Bill